Hey, it's Dr. Nate, and we are now at Module 3.3, almost to the finish line, y'all, so please stay there. We're going to talk about lesbian depictions in media and what some academics refer to as dead lesbian syndrome. Yes, it's a thing, and it's real, and we are going to get to it in just a second. So we've talked kind of a little bit about queer theory and the stereotypes that come along, not just with gay individuals, right, specifically gay men. We talked about an intersectionality, the gay black man, but when we think about lesbians and the stereotypes of lesbians that are depicted in the media, there's only two, femme and butch. That's it. So what are the two kind of most stereotypical ways in which femmes and butches are represented in the medium? So if we see a lesbian who is femme, sometimes referred to as a lipstick lesbian, they're very girly, sensitive, pretty, fashionable, and hyper feminine, right? Still going back to this patriarchy, this dichotomy of feminine and masculine. And the butch, it's kind of portrayed as the opposite, right? Tough, gritty, rough, manly, edgy, sometimes has a temper. You don't mess with them. You're scared of them. And sometimes they act in very masculine or hegemonic masculine types of ways. They might catcall women, talk about their sexual conquests. So we still have this very dichotomous stereotype of butch versus femme, masculine versus feminine that we see in the lesbian depictions in media. And that's kind of been around since the very first depictions of lesbian images that we saw back in 2004 when the L Word premiered. It's been 15 years since the L Word first premiered, but it was kind of touted as the lesbian drama that changed everything. It was the first time that we actually saw a drama, a whole show dedicated to just lesbian identity. And of course, there were some bisexual identities in there. And because it was a drama, there was a lot of stereotypes in there and also a lot of conflict in order to create drama, in order to get people to view it. So there is quite a few problematic issues within the show, within the characters, the storylines and plots, but still a huge step forward in terms of representation for the lesbian community at large. The people that were depicted, the characters in the L Word, were usually very young, thin, fashionably hip, mostly white stars. We saw these tropes that we kind of see in a lot of different dramas: falling in love with unavailable straight women, dancing and drinking, all these different initiations that we think about when we think about the rites of passage in a queer lifestyle, right? Which comes with drinking, love, and sex. That was kind of riddled with the L Word. And you're going to be watching the L Word for your first discussion of this module. So I'm not going to get too much into detail about it because I want you to watch it and then tell me about it. The real L Word is something that came out a couple of years ago, and it kind of followed up on the L Word, but they wanted to make it more of a real-world kind of reality TV show type of thing. So they took the same L Word concept and put a bunch of lesbians that were living together in different opposite ends of the coast. And then they threw them in a house together and they videotaped it. They filmed it, right? And as we do with reality television. So let's take a view really quick of a clip from the L Word. This is from season 3. So it's really going to look at how this is the trailer, I think, for season 3.
The real L Word is back for a third scintillating season. But this year we're going by coastal. The difference between East Coast and West Coast lesbians. Let's see. More leather on the East Coast?
New Yorkers have like a gritty edge to them. East Coasters, they seem not as friendly. As weird as it is, usually New York gets a bad rap. I feel like we're a little friendlier.
If you come into a bar in Brooklyn, like, someone's gonna say hi to you.
New York and LA have very different personalities. If New York is honest, I feel like LA is dishonest.
I don't understand what people have against LA.
Usually they run into someone who's not from here and thinks they embody Los Angeles because they have fake breasts or fake lips or are filthy rich, or that's not LA.
West Coast lesbians are very chill.
New York is a very tough city, and LA is a little bit easier, and I think that we get a lot of for it.
The East is gritty. The West is pretty.
Everybody's just so much prettier in LA.
They need to eat more.
Well put together, nice jewelry.
On the West Coast, there's a lot more femmes. I like femmes, so that doesn't really bother me.
Oh, I'm definitely more attracted to East Coast.
I've been attracted to girls on both coasts. I can't really pick one. I find that the queer community and the lesbian community there's like a very strong artistic side. I wake up every day there and feel really lucky that I can have that around me.
It's a big melting pot of lesbos. check out season 3 of The Real.
So the real L word. Usually at this point, if it was a physical face-to-face class, I would ask y'all to get in groups and discuss the different types of stereotypes that you saw within this short promotion for the Real L Word Season 3. So of course we still see this dichotomy of femme and butch. They even mention it straight up in this trailer. But more importantly, we also see a little bit about intersectionality in here, right? They also put in there East versus West, and talking about the different coasts. East Coast is gritty, West Coast is pretty. That's one of the girls said on here. And so again, we see that when we talk about intersectionality, yes, we still have these stereotypes and this dichotomy of masculine and feminine, but then how do we also intersect the other types of identities that belong to each person, right? Because of course, when we think about media, we're not just looking at monolithic characters that are sometimes depicted in the media, but a well-rounded individual, right? Their ethnicity, their race, social economic status, their religion, not just if they're femme or butch. And I want you to look for those things in the shows that you're going to be watching for this module specifically. So, getting back to the PowerPoint, one of the kind of butch stereotypes that has become kind of very pronounced out there is that of Norma in Shameless. And this isn't the Shameless that's the US version that we see on Showtime. This is the UK version, the original Shameless. We see lesbian, or Norma here being the butch lesbian. So let's go back over here and take a look at a clip from Shameless in the UK.
Sorry, girls. Not today.
Feeling it? The girl got game. Not my game.
Yvonne, stay out of it, Norma.
Feel it, and we'll be gone.
Not a chance.
You want me to funeral you? Feel it, or we mash you up.
For you? You couldn't mash a potato.
Tell Blossom to jam the hype.
Will you listen to yourself? Man, you're all talk. Makes fuck all sense to me.
Oh, I ain't no cork, lumper.
Sweetheart, you're white. Know what you're facing, yeah? Oh, man, your mate's a proper cack in it, ready to gun. Well, I am before I tan your ass, a sewer rat.
I think I'm going to use that insult the next time I see somebody. You sewer rat. Anyway, here we see Norma again depicted not just as a butch lesbian, but some intersectional qualities as well too, right? The fact that she's black and she's talking to a girl who's white, we still see that play out in the scene here of Shameless. So when we think about the butch lesbian in general, typically they're depicted in boots. Norma here is always depicted in boots in Shameless. She's also in plain t-shirts or other unfeminine attire. We also see butches typically having a job as a mechanic or something to be more masculine and will sometimes be taller, bulkier, a little bit probably more meat on their bones. Sometimes they're boyishly skinny though compared to their counterparts, whereas feminine can sometimes be portrayed as, yes, thin and skinny, but also very curvaceous, right? Again, intersectionality, what is the rest of their identities is being depicted. And typically when we see the butch lesbian, she is being paired with a very feminine love interest. So again, reinforcing the patriarchy that we have to have masculine and feminine as counterparts to one another and not necessarily masculine and masculine, feminine and feminine, right? So we see that happen a lot too. So GLAAD releases this network responsibility index every single year, and they assign different grades to each network depending on their depictions of the LGBTQ community. They have excellent, good, adequate, or straight up failing. And this is based, that they say, on quality, diversity, and relative quantity of LGBTQ representations. And so we see Fox and ABC Family really going into the excellent part with their depictions of well-rounded, positive LGBTQ characters that are more nuanced and intersectional. Good has kind of like in the middle. They're not there yet, but they're doing better than the failing. So we see Showtime, ABC, FX, the CW, MTV, HBO in the good category. And then straight up failing, the History Channel and A&E. They still do not include a lot of Well, let's be honest, right? Women in general in their historical recollections, but not a lot of lesbians or gays in the stories that they choose to cover on these two channels here. So they're failing. So where are we at in terms of representation of LGBTQ individuals? And this comes into play specifically when we talk about lesbians, because we still see that lesbians are disproportionately underrepresented in the media than gay characters. So gay men are coming in at 47%, making up the majority of regular and reoccurring LGBT characters. Lesbians are at 33%, so still underrepresented. And then bisexual characters even less than that at 20%. And then transgender individual less than 1%, who are nearly non-existent in these leading scripted roles. A recent report from Pride.com also said that LGBT representation confirms that there are 68 gay male characters on TV right now versus 40 lesbian characters. So again, still underrepresented whether you're looking at actual number of characters versus regular and reoccurring characters and those that are not reoccurring. So we still have a lot to go. The Auto Straddle report also reported that queer women were most likely to die on television series. Since 1976, 11% of TV shows have featured a lesbian or bi character who is female. Of those 65%, of those so of the 11% women that are depicted as lesbians and bisexual, 65% of that total representation have had a deceased queer female character. Of the lesbian characters no longer in television, 31% have died and 11% have been allowed a happy ending. Right? So there are some issues there. Academics have studied this and they have dubbed it the dead lesbian syndrome. And this is one of the TV tropes that seems to be reoccurring specifically on dramas in order to create some kind of tension and dramatic appeal to make the story seemingly more interesting to people who are watching it and therefore get people to stay tuned and keep them interested, right? This is a kind of separate branch of what people have called the bury your gays, where just in general, LGBT characters, whether it's men or women, have been depicted as being diseased and emotionally anguished. And so they either will die from a serious disease, they will be killed by someone else because they are sexual deviants, or they will take their own life. So dead lesbian syndrome is a branch of that and really focuses on lesbian individuals. And so here on your screen, you can see that there is a number of television shows that I wanted to put up here that, and this is not an exhaustive list, but this is just a couple that I think you might recognize, of television shows that have had a lesbian character where the lesbian character has died off, whether that is through murder, or they killed themselves, or some other means of death. Executive Suite, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Private Practice, Jessica Jones, Pretty Little Liars, Scream Queens, Walking Dead, Jane the Virgin, and of course the list just continues to go on and on as we come up with new television shows every single year that have depictions of lesbian or bisexual women. But there are some better representations out there, right? So if we look at different types of lesbian portrayals, we can look to Orange is the New Black, Broad City, Glee, and even Ellen to see more nuanced intersectional representations of lesbians that are actually happening out there in the media. And I want you to think about these different representations that we have now versus the L word that you're going to see, and compare and contrast these different depictions of one another. And I'm specifically looking to see if these stereotypes and tropes still hold true today from 15 years ago, or if we've moved in a different direction. That's for you to decide. Here is not an exhaustive list of all Netflix lesbian characters, but it is a platform, a digital platform that has better representation of lesbian characters than network or cable television. Now, arguably, a lot of the shows that had been previously on television will come back on Netflix, and Netflix will host them. So for example, like The Walking Dead, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, American Horror Show, Bones, these shows were at one time on network or cable television, and then they moved over to Netflix in the reruns or syndication, right? And so Netflix has a collection of all these different shows that offer a more nuanced type of representation of lesbian characters, both in the shows that they are creating now, such as, One Day at a Time, even though they canceled it, but it's back. It's going to be on Pop Television, so I'm excited about that. But Netflix does have a lot of new shows that they create themselves themselves that have lesbian characters, but they also host shows that have shown previously on television. But still, it has more of the larger, more nuanced collection of lesbian character representations. So where are we now? That's what I want you to tell me in your first discussion post. When we think about all the different types of characters that are out there, I think we can arguably, well, not arguably, I think we can agree that characters in general have shifted from very monolithic types of representations to more intersectional, nuanced depictions just overall in general. Now, when we start to think about sexuality, for example, just specifically, how is intersectionality being portrayed in terms of the lesbian, bisexual community, right? And that's what I want you to talk about.